water vanished. The land turned to dust. Then, from the driest well, a miracle exploded. What did it take to bring life back to a dying village? Once upon a time, nestled deep in the heart of a warm, sunny land, lay the beautiful village of Kelechi. It was a place where laughter bloomed as brightly as the hibiscus flowers that lined the paths. The homes were made of smooth, reddish-brown mud, with straw roofs that shone golden in the morning light. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires, carrying the sweet smell of roasted yam and pepper soup into the air. Children, with bare feet, quick as lizards, chased each other through the village square. Their giggles were like the jingle of small bells. Elders sat under the shade of ancient, wise-looking trees, sharing stories and proverbs that were older than the mountains. Their voices were soft and calm, like the gentle flow of a quiet stream. The heart of Kelechi, its very breath, was the great well. It stood tall and strong in the middle of the village, a silent guardian. Every morning, as the sun painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, the women and girls gathered there. They carried clay pots on their heads, walking with a gentle sway. The well always gave them what they needed: cool, clear water that tasted like life itself. At the well, people did not just draw water. They drew joy. They greeted each other with wide smiles. They talked about their dreams and their troubles. They helped each other lift heavy pots onto strong heads. Sharing was as natural as breathing in Kelechi. If one family had a good harvest of maize, they shared with neighbors who had less. If someone was sick, everyone came to help. Life was good, full of warmth and the feeling of belonging. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter on Kelechi, and the air hummed with happiness. But one day, a change began to whisper through the air of Kelechi. It was a change in the sun. Day after day, the sun rose higher and shone hotter. It was not the gentle warmth they knew. The sun was like a fierce giant, pounding on the land without mercy. The sky, once a soft blue, became a pale, washed-out gray. There were no clouds to hide the sun, no promises of rain. The days stretched long and dry. The ground, which was once soft and dark from past rains, began to harden like a rock. Small, angry cracks appeared everywhere. They looked like lines on an old, tired face, spreading across the paths, through the fields, and even around the homes. A fine, red dust, dry as bone, rose with every step and settled on everything. It seemed to whisper of thirst. The green plants, which had always stood tall and proud, started to droop. Their leaves, once fresh and lively, turned yellow at the edges. Soon, they curled up, brown and brittle, like old paper. The maize stalks, which should have been heavy with sweet kernels, became thin and weak. The yams, hidden deep in the earth, refused to grow big. The fields, once full of life, slowly became quiet and sad. And then, the great well, the very heart of Kelechi, began to whisper its own secret of sadness. Each morning when the women lowered their clay pots, they noticed it. The water was lower than the day before. First it was just a little bit, hardly noticeable, but then it became clear. The cool, clear water was sinking down, away from their reach. The sound of their pots hitting the water grew softer, then became a dull thump as they found only mud. A quiet worry began to grow in the hearts of the villagers. It was a small seed of fear, planted by the scorching sun and the shrinking well. They tried not to show it, but their eyes held a new kind of sadness. The laughter at the well became less, replaced by hushed whispers. The easy smiles turned into tight, worried lines. Kelechi, the sunny village, felt a shadow starting to creep over it. As the days turned into weeks, and the sun kept burning hot, the people of Kelechi began to change. The easy sharing that was once like the air they breathed slowly started to fade away. When there was less water and the food from the fields became tiny, people looked more to themselves. A mother who would always share her last piece of yam now thought twice. Her eyes would dart around, wondering if her own children had enough. A farmer, whose harvest was usually big, now guarded his small pile of maize carefully. He worried about tomorrow and the day after. The soft, warm talks at the well turned into quick, quiet trips. No more long chats. People filled their pots quickly, their faces serious, and hurried back to their homes. They looked at their neighbors with a new kind of worry. Had they taken too much water? Was their small harvest better than mine? Little questions like these, like tiny thorns, pricked at their hearts. Soon, small arguments began to buzz through the village like angry bees. You took more water than you should have, one woman might say to another, her voice sharp. My children are hungry and you hide your food. Someone else might complain. These were not the big, loud fights of old. They were quiet, sad quarrels, born from fear and hunger. Laughter, which once rang out freely like 1,000 tiny bells, became rare. It seemed to have flown away, like a bird seeking greener trees. In its place, hushed whispers filled the air. Whispers about the drying land, the empty well, and the uncertain future. Everyone felt a heavy weight in their chest, a worry that kept their smiles hidden. The wise old men and women of the village, the elders, saw these changes clearly. They sat together under the oldest Iroko tree, their faces lined with thought. They remembered the ancient stories, tales passed down from their great-great-grandfathers. They spoke of the river spirit, the powerful, unseen guardian of all the waters. The river spirit is not happy, said Elder Obina, his voice low and serious. The spirit gives endless water, enough for all of us, but only if our hearts stay pure, only if we share and care for each other, like a single family. When our hearts turn selfish, when we hoard and fight, the spirit hides its gifts. It flows away, just like the water in our well. The other elders nodded slowly, their eyes full of sorrow. They knew the old ways. They knew that the true wealth of Kelechi was not just in its water or its food, but in the kindness and strong bonds between its people. And now, these bonds were weakening, just like the dying plants and the shrinking well. A shadow, not of clouds, but of sadness, truly hung over Kelechi. In the quiet corners of Kelechi, where the sad whispers of the village did not reach so loudly, lived a young girl named Adanna. She was not tall or strong like some of the older girls. Her clothes were simple, patched in many places, and often dusty. Adanna was an orphan. Her mother and father had passed away many seasons ago, leaving her to find her own way in the world. She had no big family to give her extra food, no older brothers to fetch her water, and no older sisters to braid her hair. She lived alone in a small, humble hut just on the edge of the village. Most people in Kelechi, caught in their own worries, hardly noticed Adanna. When they saw her, they might feel a quick pang of pity, then turn back to their own empty water pots and wilting fields. They thought she must surely be struggling the most, having so little. But they did not know Adanna's secret. Even though she had very little in her small hut, only a woven mat for sleeping, a clay pot, and a few simple tools, Adanna had a treasure inside her that was bigger than any harvest. She had a very, very big and kind heart. This heart was like a small, bright lamp that never went out, even in the darkest times. Adanna never complained. She never spoke of her hunger or her thirst, even when her belly rumbled and her throat felt like sand. Instead, her eyes were always looking outwards, watching the people around her. She watched for small signs of sadness, for quiet needs that others might miss. She always looked for ways to help, not because someone asked, but because her heart told her to. Her days were spent moving quietly through the village. Sometimes she would gather firewood from the forest, more than she needed, just in case an elder was too weak to go. Sometimes she would sweep the dusty paths in front of homes, making them neat and clean, simply because it made the village look better. She was like a gentle breeze, always doing good, leaving only clean air and soft, simple language. Even with the heat beating down and the village growing quiet with worry, Adanna's kind heart kept beating strong. She didn't have much to give, but she gave what she had: her strength, her time, and her gentle spirit. And she did these things quietly, like a secret gift, never waiting for a thank you or a smile in return. One scorching afternoon, the sun was at its highest point, making the air shimmer. Adanna was walking near the hut of Mama Ngozi. Mama Ngozi was one of the oldest women in Kelechi, her face a map of kindness and hard work. But now she looked weak. Adanna saw her trying to lift a heavy clay pot, an empty one, ready to go to the well. Mama Ngozi's hands shook a little, and she leaned on her walking stick, breathing hard. Her throat looked dry. Adanna knew Mama Ngozi had not been to the well in days. The long walk in the sun was too much for her old bones. Adanna had just come back from fetching water herself. In her own small calabash, there was only a little water left. It was precious. Her last few sips before she would need to go back to the sad, shrinking well. Her own throat felt parched. But when she saw Mama Ngozi, Adanna didn't think about her own thirst. Her kind heart felt a sudden ache for the old woman. Quietly, she walked closer. "Mama Ngozi," she said softly, her voice like a cool whisper. "Let me help you." Before Mama Ngozi could even answer, Adanna gently took the empty pot from her trembling hands. Then, without a sound, she walked into Mama Ngozi's small hut. A moment later, she came out with the calabash. She carefully poured her own few sips of water into a small drinking cup. "Please, Mama Ngozi," she offered, holding it out. "Drink this." Mama Ngozi's eyes widened. She looked at Adanna, then at the water. Her old hands slowly reached out and took the cup. She drank the water slowly, each gulp a soft sound in the quiet air. The cool water seemed to bring a little light back to her eyes. She sighed, a long, thankful breath. "Adanna," Mama Ngozi whispered, her voice rough but full of thanks. You shared your last drops. May the spirits bless you." Adanna just smiled, a small, gentle smile that made her eyes sparkle. She didn't wait for more words. She simply took Mama Ngozi's empty pot and without another sound, began walking towards the distant, dusty path that led to the well. Mama Ngozi watched her go, a look of wonder and deep gratitude on her face. She knew, deep in her heart, that Adanna was a special child, a true gift to Kelechi. Another time, as the sun began to dip low, painting the sky in fiery oranges, Adanna was walking home with a small, woven basket. Inside, she had found a few groundnuts, tiny brown treasures she had dug from the dry earth near the edge of the forest. They were not many, perhaps just enough to quiet the rumble in her own hungry stomach. As she passed the village square, she saw a group of children. Their laughter, usually so bright, was quiet now. Their eyes were big and sad. They sat, huddled together, watching an older boy peel a single, small orange. Their stomachs, Adanna knew, must be aching. She remembered the feeling. Adanna paused, her own stomach pinched with hunger. The groundnuts were so few. But then she looked at the children's faces, especially little Uche, whose small hands were pressed against his empty belly. Her kind heart swelled. She walked towards them, her steps soft like a falling leaf. "Hello, my friends," she said gently. The children looked up, surprised. Adanna knelt down, opening her woven basket. "Look what I found," she said, showing the small handful of groundnuts. The children's eyes grew wide. They knew how hard it was to find food now. Adanna carefully counted the groundnuts, then began to share them out, one by one. She made sure each child got an equal share. Little Uche's eyes lit up as he took his portion. He popped it into his mouth, a small smile growing on his face. Adanna watched them eat, her own hunger forgotten for a moment. She kept not a single groundnut for herself. When they had all taken their share, Adanna simply gave them a warm, gentle nod and continued on her way. The children, chewing slowly, looked after her, a new warmth spreading in their small hearts. It wasn't just about food or water. Adanna also saw the little things that needed doing. One hot morning, she noticed that the fence around Papa Emeka's small yam patch had fallen down. Papa Emeka was an old man, his back bent with years of farming. He was too tired and too sad about the dry earth to fix it himself. Without a good fence, goats could easily come in and eat the few green shoots that were still trying to grow. Adanna fetched some strong branches and vines. She worked quietly, under the harsh sun, knotting the vines tightly around the broken parts of the fence. Her small hands pulled and tied until the fence stood straight and strong again. Dust covered her face and sweat beaded on her forehead, but she did not stop until the job was finished. Papa Emeka, coming out of his hut later in the day, saw his mended fence. He blinked, rubbing his tired eyes. He looked around, wondering who could have done such a kind thing. He saw no one. Adanna had already slipped away, like a quiet shadow, towards another task that called her kind heart. Papa Emeka shook his head slowly, a small, hopeful smile touching his lips for the first time in many days. Someone cared. Adanna did all these kind things and many more, without asking for anything in return. She never spoke of her own good deeds. She never waited for a word of thanks. Her kindness was like the quiet growth of a seed under the earth, unseen but powerful. Because of this, and because the hot sun had made everyone's worries so big, most people in Kelechi did not even see Adanna's actions. Their minds were full of their own hunger, their own thirst, and their own fears about the dry land. They walked with their eyes on the ground, thinking only of what they lacked. They were so busy counting their own troubles that they couldn't see the quiet light Adanna was spreading. When Mama Ngozi drank the water, she felt true thanks, but she did not tell everyone. When the children ate the groundnuts, they felt happy for a moment, but they did not go tell their parents about Adanna. When Papa Emeka saw his mended fence, he wondered who did it, but he did not find Adanna to ask. They were all touched by her kindness, but they saw it as a small, passing good thing, not a deep, important lesson. A few people perhaps caught a quick glimpse. They might see Adanna helping someone, or walking with an extra bundle of firewood. They might think, Adanna is a good girl. But the thought would quickly float away, pushed aside by the heavy clouds of worry that hung over the village. They were still caught in their own fear, still trapped by the idea of not having enough. They could not yet truly understand the big power of Adanna's small, quiet acts. So Adanna continued her work, a single, unwavering flame of kindness in a village where fear had begun to make hearts cold. She was like a secret river of goodness, flowing beneath the dry surface, waiting for the right moment to show its strength. The heat in Kelechi grew worse, and the well stayed almost dry. The arguments among the villagers became a little sharper, like dried thorns. In these hard times, the wise elders of Kelechi felt a heavy weight on their hearts. They knew the old ways, the true stories of their people. Every evening, as the last light left the sky, they gather under the biggest, oldest Iroko tree in the village. This tree was so old, its roots were like strong, winding rivers above the ground. It had seen many seasons, good and bad. Here the elders would sit on low stools, their voices soft but serious. Elder Obina, the oldest and wisest of them all, would begin. "The land is crying," he would say, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The well is silent. Our people's hearts are troubled." The other elders would nod. They knew the problem was not just the sun, but something deeper. They remembered the ancient pact. This was a promise made long, long ago between the people of Kelechi and the river spirit. The ancient pact says, Elder Amina, a woman with eyes as deep and calm as a still pond, would explain that the river spirit blesses us with endless water. Our rivers flow strong, our wells stay full. But this blessing comes with a duty. Our hearts must stay pure. We must share with open hands. We must care for our family, our neighbors, and even strangers. This is how the spirit stays happy. This is how the water keeps flowing. Elder Kofi, a man known for his quick mind, would add, if we forget the old ways, if greed and selfishness enter our hearts, the river spirit feels sad. It turns away from us. It hides its gifts. The water goes back to its secret places, deep in the earth, and the land grows thirsty. They looked around their village, which was once so full of life and laughter. Now, the quiet sadness, the hidden arguments, the closed hearts, these were clear signs. The elders sighed. They believed Kelechi had broken the ancient pact. The river spirit was not happy, and that was why the water had gone. They talked for hours, searching for a way to bring the spirit's blessings. Even as the elders talked of lost pacts and sad spirits, something quiet and strange began to happen. It was so small at first that most people did not even notice. Their eyes were still on the dry earth, their minds on their empty water pots. But if you looked closely, especially near Adanna's small hut, you might see it. One morning, in a patch of dry, cracked earth where only dead plants lay, a tiny splash of color appeared. It was a single flower, bright red and strong, pushing its way up through the dust. It seemed to bloom just for itself, a tiny secret of beauty in a world of brown. How could one flower grow so brightly when all others had died? No one could say. Then, at the great well itself, another small wonder happened. The well was almost completely dry now, just a muddy bottom. But if you bent down very close and listened very hard, you could hear it. A faint, soft drip, drip, drip. It was not the strong flow of old, but from a tiny crack deep inside the well wall, a single line of clear, cool water was slowly making its way out. It was a trickle so small, it could not fill even a cup in a whole day. Yet, it was new. It was fresh. It was water where there had been none. Even the birds seemed to feel a change. Many birds had flown away from Kelechi when the land grew dry. But now, a few small, colorful birds, like sunbirds and weavers, began to return. They did not sing loudly. Instead, their songs were soft and sweet, like quiet secrets shared between friends. They often sang near Adanna's hut, or in the old tree where she sometimes sat. Their quiet melodies floated on the hot air, a gentle promise of better days. The villagers, still heavy with worry, sometimes saw these things. Look, a flower, Someone might point, then quickly forget it. Is that water dripping in the well? Another might ask, and sigh, seeing how little it was. They thought these were just strange happenings, not real signs. They did not understand why these small wonders were appearing, or what magic was starting to stir. They could not yet see the connection between these tiny changes and the quiet kindness that was flowing, unseen, from Adanna's heart. The small, strange signs, the single red flower, the tiny drip in the well, the returning birds, went mostly unnoticed. The big, crushing problem of thirst and hunger grew stronger each day. The hot sun kept beating down, never resting. The land became even drier, like old, cracked pottery. The great well, which once gave so much life, was now truly empty. There was no water left, not even a tiny puddle. Only dry, hard mud sat at the bottom, like a sad, dark eye. The ropes that pulled the buckets hung down uselessly, touching nothing but dust. The silence around the well was heavy and thick, much different from the happy sounds of old. The people of Kelechi grew weaker with each passing day. Their steps were slow and heavy. Their voices were soft and tired. The children, who once ran and played with endless energy, now sat quietly in the shade, their eyes big and sad. Their little bodies felt hot and dry. Sometimes you could hear a small, sad cough from a child, their throat parched. Even the strong men, the farmers who used to work the fields from sunrise to sunset, looked tired and worried. Their muscles felt weak. The women, who used to sing as they pounded yams, now moved slowly, their songs long forgotten. Their faces were drawn, their lips dry and cracked. The spark in their eyes had dimmed. Desperation, like a hungry animal, began to walk freely through Kelechi. People started to talk about leaving. "There is no hope here," whispered one man to his wife, his voice raspy with thirst. "Maybe in the land across the big river, there is water. Maybe we should go." Other families nodded, their eyes showing a deep sadness. The idea of leaving their homes, the land of their fathers, was like a sharp knife to their hearts. But the thirst was stronger. They felt lost and broken. The shadow over Kelechi was now a deep, dark night, with no stars of hope in sight. Adanna watched her village. Her own stomach felt hollow, and her throat was dry, just like everyone else's. But the pain she felt was not just for herself. It was a deep ache for all the people of Kelechi. She saw the tired faces, the slow steps, the hidden tears. It was like a heavy stone sitting in her own chest. She saw the children especially. Their laughter was gone. Their bright eyes were now dull and full of questions that no one could answer. Adanna had always wanted to make people happy, to ease their burdens. But now, it seemed, her small acts of kindness were not enough to fix such a big problem. The well was empty, the land was dying, and the village was losing its hope. One very hot afternoon, the air hung still and heavy, like a thick blanket. Adanna was walking past the market square, which was now mostly empty and silent. There were no traders selling their goods, no happy sounds of buying and selling. Most people stayed inside, saving their strength. Then Adanna saw her. A young woman, just a little older than Adanna herself, sat huddled in the shade of a small, wilting tree. Her name was Kioma, and she was known for her sweet songs. But today, her face was wet with tears. In her arms, she held her tiny baby, who was crying. It was not the usual cry of a hungry baby. This was a weak, rough sound, a cough of thirst. The baby's lips were dry and cracked, and its small hands weakly reached for its mother's chest, finding no comfort. Kioma whispered to her baby, trying to soothe it, but her own voice was hoarse. She had no milk left for her little one, and no water to give. The mother's eyes, full of a deep, silent pain, looked around, searching, hoping for something, anything, but there was nothing. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Adanna felt a sharp pain pierce her own heart. It was a pain stronger than her own thirst. Seeing Kioma and her crying baby, helpless and suffering, was like a fire burning inside Adanna. This was the worst kind of hurt, the pain of a mother watching her child suffer. Adanna knew, deep inside, that something had to change. She had to do something, anything, even if it seemed too small to matter. In her hand, Adanna clutched her own small calabash. Inside, there was a tiny amount of water. It was truly her very last. Just a few sips, enough to wet her own dry tongue one more time. She had saved it, knowing she might not get any more until the rains returned, which seemed so far away. This water was precious, her last small shield against the burning thirst. But when she looked at Kioma's tear-streaked face and heard the baby's weak cry, the value of her own last water faded. A new, strong feeling filled her, the urge to give, even when there was nothing now. Adanna stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on Kioma and her tiny crying baby. The sound of that baby's thirsty cough was like a small, sharp pain in Adanna's own chest. She looked down at the tiny amount of water in her calabash. It was so little, just a few sips. It was her very last defense against the burning heat and the emptiness in her stomach. Her mind worked quickly, but her heart moved even faster. If she drank it, it would give her a few moments of comfort, but it would not help Kioma's baby. It would not bring water to the empty well. It would not stop the deep sadness in Kelechi. Then, Adanna looked at the great well. It stood there, a silent, dusty monument to their pain. The elders had spoken of the river spirit, of hearts needing to be pure. Adanna didn't fully understand all the old stories, but she understood one thing: giving, even when it hurt, felt right. It felt like the only way to fight against the big, sad darkness that covered her village. A quiet strength filled Adanna. She took a deep breath. She walked with slow, determined steps towards the center of the village, towards the dry mouth of the great well. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange, clear purpose. The dust rose around her bare feet with each step. When she reached the well, she stood at its edge. She looked down into the deep, dark hole, seeing only dry, cracked mud. There was no sign of water, not even the smallest hint of moisture. Other villagers were nowhere near. They had given up coming to the well. Adanna was alone with her decision. She held her calabash steady. The sun beat down on her, making the small amount of water shimmer. It seemed to call her name, begging her to drink it. But Adanna closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Kioma's baby, of Mama Ngozi, of Papa Emeka, of all the silent suffering in Kelechi. Then, with a gentle, firm movement, Adanna slowly tilted her calabash. The precious, clear water, her very last drops, trickled out. It fell down into the dark, dry well. There was no splash, only a soft, quiet plink as it landed on the dry mud at the bottom. It was gone, all of it. Adanna stood straight, her calabash now empty in her hand. She did not feel sad that her last water was gone. She did not expect magic to happen right away. She did not wait for a special sign. She had simply given all she had. From the purest place in her heart, she had given it for her village, for the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, her small act of kindness might somehow, in some unseen way, help to fill the great emptiness that had fallen upon Kelechi. Adanna stood by the well, her empty calabash now light in her hand. The last of her precious water had vanished into the dry, cracked earth below. She felt a quiet calm, even though she knew her own thirst was still there. She had given all she could. For a moment, nothing happened. The village was still, under the harsh, silent sun. Only the dry wind whispered through the wilting trees. Adanna took a slow breath, about to turn away. Then, the sound, deep and low, began to rumble from inside the earth. It was a sound like distant thunder, not from the sky, but from deep below their feet. The ground beneath Adanna's feet trembled just a little. The sound grew louder, a deep growl, as if something very big was waking up from a long sleep. Suddenly, with a mighty whoosh, a powerful burst of water exploded from the bottom of the great well. It was not a trickle. It was not a small stream. It was a huge, strong gush, like a strong arm pushing water out with great force. The water rushed upwards, clear and bright, glittering in the sunlight. It filled the deep well faster than anyone could imagine. The water rose higher and higher, like a happy giant stretching after a long sleep. It reached the very top of the well, then overflowed its stone edges, spilling onto the dusty ground. It flowed in shining streams down the paths where only dust had been. It spread through the village square, making the dry earth wet and dark. The water was clear, sparkling, and so wonderfully cool. The air around the well suddenly felt fresh and alive, no longer heavy with thirst. It was more water than anyone had seen in Kelechi for a very, very long time. From their huts, the villagers heard the great sound. Some came out slowly, blinking in the bright light, wondering if it was a dream. Others, hearing the strong gush, ran quickly, their hearts beating fast, with a new kind of hope. They came to the well, their eyes wide with astonishment. They saw the water, flowing endlessly, clear and beautiful. They touched it, dipped their fingers in it, then brought it to their lips. The taste was sweet and pure, like nothing they had tasted in weeks. They drank deeply, long, joyful gulps. They splashed it on their faces, feeling its cool touch. Shouts of joy, loud and clear, now ran through the village. Laughter, true laughter, burst out from many throats. It was as if the sun itself had suddenly turned kind, and the very spirit of the land had woken up. The great well was giving again, full and strong, its precious water flowing freely for all. A miracle had happened, right before their very eyes. The village square around the great well was now a place of joyful chaos. People drank, splashed, and laughed. Tears of happiness mixed with the cool, fresh water on their faces. The air, which had been thick with despair, now vibrated with new life. Among the crowd, a young woman stood, her face shining. It was Kioma, the mother whose baby had been crying from thirst just moments before. Her own body felt strong again, filled with the water she had drunk. Her baby, quiet and content, lay sleeping peacefully in her arms, its small face no longer pinched with pain. Choma looked at Adanna, who stood quietly near the well, a small, gentle smile on her lips, watching everyone else. Adanna didn't try to draw attention to herself, but Kioma remembered. She remembered Adanna's soft voice, her kind eyes, and the way Adanna had offered her last precious sips of water. She remembered Adanna walking to the well just before the great gush began. A sudden, clear understanding filled Kioma's mind. "Adanna!" she cried out, her voice strong and clear, cutting through the joyful noise. It was Adanna. Everyone turned to look. Kioma pointed a trembling finger at the young orphan girl. She poured her very last water into the well. She had only a tiny bit left, but she gave it all. For my baby. For us. Her voice shook with deep emotion. At first, a few people looked confused. Then, slowly, understanding began to spread through the crowd, like ripples on a calm pond. Mama Ngozi, who had been refreshed by Adanna's shared water, stepped forward. Her old eyes, now bright, looked at Adanna. "Yes," she said, her voice clear. "She brought me water when I could not walk. She gave her last drops to an old woman." Papa Emeka, who had found his fence mysteriously mended, raised his hand. "And my fence?" "Someone fixed it. I wondered who it was. It must have been Adanna." With her quiet hands, the children who had shared Adanna's few groundnuts now remembered. Little Uche, woken by the excitement, pointed. "She gave me food. My stomach was rumbling, and she shared her nuts." Other children nodded eagerly, remembering the sweet taste of kindness. Voices in the crowd began to light up, not just with joy from the water, but with a deeper kind of understanding. They remembered small acts of unexpected help, a quiet kindness offered when no one asked. They remembered Adanna, moving like a soft shadow, always helping, always giving, even when she had nothing for herself. A hush fell over the well. All eyes turned to Adanna, not just with thanks, but with a new kind of respect. They saw her not just as an orphan, but as the quiet light who had kept the flame of kindness alive when everyone else was in darkness. The amazing truth, unspoken for so long, had finally burst forth, just like the water from the well. As the villagers whispered Adanna's name, their faces full of wonder, the wise elders slowly moved to the center of the crowd. They stood tall under the restored sun, their presence calm and strong. Elder Obinna raised his hand, and slowly the joyful shouts softened to a respectful silence. Everyone turned to listen. Elder Obinna looked at Adanna, his eyes full of warmth and understanding. Then he looked at the villagers, his gaze sweeping over every face. "My people of Kelechi," he began, his voice clear and deep, like the steady flow of a river. "Today, we have seen a great miracle. Our great well, which was dry and silent, now sings with water. Our thirst is gone, and our hope has returned." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But this miracle," he continued, "did not come by chance. It came because of a pure heart. It came because of the ancient pact that Elder Amina spoke of, the pact between our people and the river spirit." Elder Amina stepped forward, her voice soft but strong. "The river spirit," she explained, "is the unseen guardian of all life-giving waters. It sees into our hearts. It feels our joy, and it feels our sorrow. When our hearts are full of kindness, when we share freely and help each other, the river spirit rejoices. It pours its blessings upon us, and the water flows without end. But when our hearts close up, when fear and selfishness make us forget how to share," Elder Kofi added, his voice serious, "the river spirit feels a deep sadness. It turns away. It hides its gifts. The water goes back to its secret, silent places, far below the earth. This is why our well dried up. This is why our land became thirsty. We had forgotten the true way of Kelechi." Elder Obinna then pointed to Adanna. "This young girl, Adanna, has reminded us. When we were all lost in our own troubles, when we guarded our last drops of water, Adanna gave away her very last. She did not think of herself. She thought only of a mother and her crying baby. She gave from a heart that was completely pure, full of love and kindness, even when she had nothing left. Her small act," Elder Amina said, her voice filled with quiet wonder, "was like a tiny stream that flowed from her pure heart. It was this tiny stream that spoke to the river spirit. It was this pure kindness that healed the broken pact. Adanna's giving when she had nothing, was the greatest gift of all. It was the key that unlocked the Spirit's blessings once more. The river spirit teaches us a great lesson today, Elder Obinna said, his voice rising. A lesson as old as the earth and as clear as this new water. It teaches us, the more you give with a kind heart, the more you receive. Kindness is like a well that can never truly run dry. It fills not just the giver, but everyone around them. It brings true abundance, not just in water, but in happiness and strong community. The villagers listened, their heads nodding slowly. The words of the elders, spoken with such wisdom, touched their hearts. They looked from the overflowing well to Adanna, and then to each other. A great understanding settled over them. They had been blind. They had forgotten. But now, the truth was as clear as the water that flowed freely before them. With the great well overflowing and the elders' wise words ringing in their ears, a deep change swept through the village of Kelechi. It was as if the sun itself had returned to its kindest smile, and the air was filled not just with water, but with fresh hope. The very next day, and in the days that followed, the dried up fields began to show new life. The rich, wet earth, fed by the overflowing well and the grateful river spirit, welcomed tiny green shoots. The maize stalks, which had seemed dead, pushed up new leaves. The yams, hidden beneath the soil, began to swell and grow strong. Soon, Kelechi's farms were green and rich once more, promising abundant harvests. But the biggest change was in the people themselves. The heavy shadow of worry lifted from their faces. The quick arguments and harsh whispers disappeared. Laughter, true, joyful laughter, returned to the village square, louder and brighter than before. It was like 1,000 tiny bells ringing happily. Children ran and played with all their old energy, splashing in the new puddles left by the overflowing well. The villagers remembered the elders' words. They remembered Adanna's brave, kind act. They began to share again, not just because they had much, but because they had learned the deeper lesson. If one family had a big harvest, they did not just share a little. They brought baskets of yams and gourds of fresh water to their neighbors, freely and with warm smiles. If someone was sick, everyone came to help, cooking food, fetching herbs, and sitting by their side. The strong bonds between people grew stronger than ever. The great well became more than just a source of water. It became a living reminder, a silent teacher. Every time someone drew water, they remembered Adanna's last drops. They remembered that powerful burst of water that followed. The well taught them that true abundance came not from holding tight to what you have, but from opening your hand and giving with a pure heart. Adanna, the quiet orphan, was now seen as a true hero of Kelechi. People greeted her with deep respect and warm smiles. They offered her gifts of food and help, but Adanna still gave most of it away to those who needed it more. She remained humble, her heart still the same quiet lamp of kindness. She had shown them that the biggest strength was not in muscle, but in the spirit of giving. And so, the village of Kelechi lived on, not just watered by its well, but nourished by a deep and lasting lesson. The story of Adanna and the miraculous return of the water was told and retold, from grandmothers to grandchildren, from one generation to the next. It was a story that taught them that the biggest treasure is not gold or riches, but the warmth of a kind heart. It taught them that true wealth is found in sharing, in caring, and in giving freely, even when you have very little. The people of Kelechi learned that the river spirit truly blessed those who lived with open hands and open hearts. They understood that kindness, like the purest water, always finds a way to flow back to you. not just to quench your own thirst, but to fill the lives of everyone around you with joy, abundance, and everlasting community. And in Kelechi, the laughter never flew away again.